25 minutes or so is to widen our thinking a little bit, I guess. I mean, we're all here to think about learning technology, and we're all here to think about how we can deliver better learning experiences for our learners in whatever organisation that we're part of. But there are problems, and I think they still haven't gone away in all of the 23 years worth of experience I've had trying to leverage technology to deliver better learning outcomes for people. And one of the ways to phrase this is perhaps to say that we focus a lot on learning, more almost to the detriment of the performance we want to see people achieving, either in terms of their the behaviours or the skills that we want to see them exhibiting in their jobs or in their roles, or developing in their educational stances as well. And one of the key things I'd like us to focus on for the next few minutes is why that is, and also to really, I think, raise to all of our attention the importance of context. So not just the learning experience that we're busy creating in terms of how great it looks or how interactive it might be, but how does that sit in the wider scheme of things? How does it sit in the wider environment that people are working with or working in? And the thinking also about what happens after we've delivered this wonderful learning experience, whether that be online e-learning or offline face-to-face or some sort of blend. So that's really what I would like us to sort of explore. Here's an example, really, of how thinking wider is crucial. So we all know about the importance of induction and bringing new employees into into our organisations, and we tend to focus often on induction being that moment when people have arrived on their first day. We might give them some e-learning. We might, if we're lucky, get them to meet various key people around the building. More often than not, very little happens at all. So that actual experience that people have when they join an organisation is pretty dysfunctional, and it's not very well aligned. And so one of the things I think we need to remember is to bring ourselves away from what we're trying to achieve and look around at all the connecting points around, say, for example, induction. So if we use the word onboarding to sort of help that process of widening our understanding or widening our thinking, you can see how it touches lots of different areas. So when we're onboarding someone new, we are obviously looking to ensure that they're productive, that they are going to learn the sort of skills and exhibit the behaviours that we've recruited them for. But there are issues around recruitment, referrals, making sure that they're safe in the workplace, accidents and compliance. We're looking to make sure that they're in line with the culture and brand of that organisation, our organisation, and that the process that they go through or the experience that they have allows them to perform at the levels that we intend, and that we retain them, we have loyalty, and we achieve sort of levels of productivity and performance, and also develop them as individuals in terms of their talent, and to tap into the innovation that we'd like to see that would drive the organisation on, but also the individuals as well. So, and a lot of that touches areas that don't normally sit just in learning and development on its own. We need to be able to communicate effectively around with other people in the organisation to tap into that quite in important ways. Otherwise, it will fail. Otherwise, we see the statistics that we typically see, which is a lot of people leaving organisations within 6 months. If we're lucky, they get to a year, and all of that expense, that time, that energy is lost. It's a huge waste. And that's not just induction that suffers from that. We struggle to hold the attention of people when it comes to the learning experiences that we give them, even though we may well have put lots of time and energy into that design. And the reason is we're forgetting about all of these lurking barriers that to allow them to get the most out of that experience. Here are some. So we've designed our learning experience, and let's say it's online, it's using technology, but we often find that people can't find it. They can't see it. There's no clear pathway to finding the tools that are available to them. We're not communicating effectively or regularly enough to be able to engage with that. they don't really understand the context in which we're giving them this learning. So why do it? A lot of compliance, mandatory training fails because we fail to communicate the context as to why that's important to them as individuals. We struggle sometimes that we put accurate information up, but it may well be poorly written, not particularly clear or well designed, and that's a key area where organisations around this room can support with, and also develop your own skills as learning and development experts. We might have some fundamental infrastructure issues, so we have blind faith in our IT being able to work at the speeds we want it to deliver the video or the audio that we've built into our e-learning, and that breaks that experience that people really genuinely get, which ultimately then affects whether they're going to actually take on board the messages and start to develop the behaviours and skills that we're looking for. We're all asking people to become more social and open about their learning and to collaborate more. But there's still a lot of latent fear around, especially organisations where we're quite happy perhaps in the social context, but in a corporate context, we're still holding on to the sort of knowledge that we have in ways that are actually now limiting us rather than supporting us in our roles. So we have to tackle that fear. If we're going to include those into our designs, we need to make sure that people are going to openly engage with it and get the value from them. One of the key ones, though, here is this idea of silo structures. So in an organisation, we will have our learning and development. We may well have recruitment over here. We might have internal communications in another area, and we may have information technology in a department in another area. And critically, when it comes to designing an end-to-end successful learning solution that delivers on the productivity level and change that you're looking to achieve, if that communication flow between those areas isn't there, then you'll struggle to deliver that project effectively. You'll either not reach the right people, or it won't be the right quality, or it'll be the wrong messages that are reaching out to people. So being able to bring those elements together is really critical. Now, one little model here that I find quite useful is as a mnemonic. We like mnemonics, they're memorable. Clear. How do we keep our communications clear? Well, this basically summarises some key things that works at all levels. It works both at a macro sort of strategy level, but it also works at almost down to the level of each email you might send out as part of a reinforcement campaign for your learning activities. So when you are communicating, is it clear that this learning is relevant to the current workload that I'm doing in my job? Is it relevant to me? Have you made it personal to me? Is it really clear what to do and where to find and how to actually activate this learning experience? Listing those next steps. Are the expectations clear? What does success look like? What does it look like to me? How, am I going to be more in line for a positive performance review, or will I succeed better in my role, in my job? Is that are those expectations clear? And ability. Do I have the tools and support available to actually make this happen? So it comes back to my earlier point. We can design something wonderful, but if the LMS on which this wonderful learning experience sits is actually very difficult to find or slow to access, then you've created several barriers to actually people being able to experience what you've delivered. And then finally, the return on my WIIFM, what's in it for me? So what's actually in it for me to actually spend my attention and time on the materials that you've developed for me? Clear. And what we can do is, if we achieve that, and it's hard to write materials and write content that delivers this, but if we can do that, then we can start to genuinely reinforce and build through practice, through confidence building and demonstrating competence in the role, through a communication strategy that supports that learning experience well. That's a critical part of any learning design, I think. It's the communications that sit around it. And linked to that is the deeper understanding of how we're motivated as individuals. I don't know if you know this book. It's been around for a while. Daniel Pink. It's a book called Drive, and it's about what really motivates us in work and in life. And it points out three key areas: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy means I've been given the freedom, space, the time, and the relationships around me to be able to deliver on what I promised. Does your organisation allow that to happen, to foster a positive, productive environment? One that's particularly important to us is the mastery. So are we providing the right tools to develop people in the ways that they can get better at their jobs? And that might involve different techniques to the ones that you may consider currently. And finally, the purpose. Are we clear about why we're doing this? And that harks back to what I was just been saying earlier about the clear model. If your organisation isn't clear about its purpose, and the people that in your organisation aren't clear about why they're there, what they're doing, asking them to participate in learning that you want them to do to develop in their roles is a much harder job. So it's important to make sure that the communications that you provide around your learning is in line with reinforcing those values, the mission, the activities that your organisation is there for. That way you'll get your engagement levels up. Equally, taking a broader view as to what learning design is about. So it's not just about isolated learning events in the classroom or even online, but it's about recognising that learning takes place in the workplace. It's about recognising that a lot of that is around leveraging experience of ourselves and others around us, being able to capture that experience and deliver that and expose people to that in ways that will accelerate their own abilities to improve their performance. And then through the formal education programs that we might provide. And the plethora of media channels that we can use is quite extensive these days. Technology provides us with a rich variety of things that we can do. So ranging from using good video through to social tools, even increasingly trying to capture highly immersive, simulative scenarios and environments which can replicate the sort of working environment or situations that staff find themselves in. These are becoming much more aligned to what we're trying to do, which is achieve that behavioural shift in time in the shortest possible window of time. Investing in those sorts of tools can be highly effective at achieving that real goal, not the artificial goal of putting people through courses and getting high satisfaction rates for them. That doesn't necessarily mean they're really delivering any real value back into the organisation. So we've got a much richer set of tools available to us to do that, to deliver these experiences and to think wider about what the learning experience really is. And the different sorts of blends that we can put together, and this is a sort of representative model of how you might put the various jigsaw pieces together of different blended events or blended structures. So whether it's providing pre-work for live events, simple elements, or providing online materials to support coaching, or post reinforcement of live events to ensure that transfer is taking a place, or that people are actually putting into practice what you've been exposing them to, or combinations of all of that into much more complex streams, like this sort of example below. This takes careful thinking and design, and a lot of that is missing often when we think about blended learning. It does take energy and time to do, but if we do it, it forces us to think more holistically, more wider around how people will engage with programs of this nature, and that we can be more confident that we will be helping people on their learning journey in a more active ways, in more powerfully positive ways that they would actually take on board and start practicing the new skills in their job. Here's an example of how thinking more holistically for onboarding purposes, induction, which is an increasing, it's always important for organisations, especially as we enter hopefully a new growth phase of the economy. It's not just about induction, which typically sits here in this line here, once people move from preparing to join an organisation to actually joining. So induction isn't just about the first day or even the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's actually about what happens before they even arrive. Are we hiring the right people? Are we attracting the right people in the first place? So how linked in are we with our recruitment activities and our external brand face? How can we leverage the learning materials that we might create to support that more robustly? How can we support the selection process? Can we use technology to make that more efficient? Can we tap into a wider global pool of people, give people more accurate reflections of what it's like to work at the organisation, so that we don't have people falling out that process later down the line once they've invested time and we've invested time and money in them, even though there's a misalignment in values perhaps, and also practical basic skills. And then if we have selected people, can we help them be the best they can be from day one and give them the confidence and the basic competence to arrive on day one, to engage with their fellow new employees, but also others around them, so that we can give them e-learning, we can give them opportunities to practice, to understand the organisation, to even do some of the mandatory materials that they might need to engage before they even turn up. And there's increasing evidence to show that people are very open to doing that. This is a motivated window of time once you've got your new role to when you join, and that people will actively engage with that. This takes lots of pressure off once they arrive, and it takes lots of pressure off the managers of these people, new people coming in, who can then focus on supporting them more directly around, getting the initial tasks done, connecting them with the right people around the business. So engaging them in the business, connecting them with the crucial aspect of the social network across the organisation. And then it doesn't stop there. We still continue to support people through to help them exhibit and tune and refine and develop their skills, so that within the shortest period of time from joining or from post-joining to actual arrival at that time of being productive and competent and confident in your role, and we want that to be as short as possible, and we don't want people to drop out on the route. So this model helps us, I think in those ways, and there's quite a bit of work that would go on in each of these stages to help define what that particular solution and mix of channels of tools that you would use specific to your organisation. But it's a very powerful way to help think differently and a bit wider than, say, an hour-long e-learning module on an LMS, that may be great, but actually doesn't have a great deal of long-term impact, arguably. So, how can we leverage technology to support performance, not just learning? So, one of the key things is about knocking down these barriers. So technology in its own right, if it creates its own barriers, we're in trouble, aren't we? We can create something fantastic, and then we find that half of our people can't access it for one reason or another. So you'll hear around this auditorium or this room lots about multi-device, responsive design materials, making sure that whatever you build will just work on any device, pretty much any device that your people are using. And it's not just the sanctioned ones, it will be perhaps their own devices as well. So that's increasingly an open playing field. And it introduces complexities, and you should use the right sorts of tools. One of which Epic has close association with Gomo Learning. If you're interested in a multi-device learning that's, as it says on that flyer over there, simplified, you want to develop your own materials, then do go and have a look at it. It's quite powerful. When you are designing the learning, making sure that it's personalised to individuals' needs. So if you're going to be delivering semi-technical information, in this example here, you can differentiate between people who have got good knowledge, if they're already, say, a software engineer, and maybe those who are not software engineers. You give them a different track through the learning and support them accordingly. Also using diagnostics to sort of demonstrate existing understanding. Why do we put people through mandatory type e-learning, which is the same every year? It doesn't actually build on what they know. It doesn't shorten the experience. It doesn't really lead to additional impact. It doesn't necessarily lead to the behaviours you want to see in the organisation. So how do we tailor that so that it's contextualized to this personal need. Make sure that the learning experience is very practice-oriented, so it's as closely associated to the tasks and experience that people will find on an everyday basis in the organisation that they're in. So we can do that increasingly easily here, using technology to support that, to create virtual scenarios, to connect people online across the world in multidisciplinary teams to conduct activities that are free from geography, maybe not free from time zones, but free from geography, where they can engage and solve problems together. And these can be real problems or very close to real problems, that they can remove the sort of re-entry problems that you get with training if it's too abstract, the activities that you give people. Make sure it's aligned to what they're really going to do, in which case they can build on that and deliver in the workplace much more quickly. Obviously, it helps to make the e-learning as engaging as possible. One of the things we have to do here is, because if we have problems with some of the other barriers, i.e. it's hard to find or difficult to engage with or a bit slow because our networks aren't slow, well, you can make up for it a bit by, when they do arrive there, that it's actually surprising or engaging or it looks great. But it's not essential if actually the learning itself is 100% relevant to what I need to do a good job. And if we've aligned the communication already, that this is a valuable use of my time and I want to do it, then actually you can provide people with materials that are fairly straightforward, and they'll engage with it effectively and turn that into real practice. So it's not essential, but obviously it helps in terms of keeping that communication clear. Telling stories is a very powerful way to help people remember the learning that you provide. So being able to tap into the individual stories across the organisation or external ones that are best practice that you want to introduce into your organisation is really critical. And then using game-type design techniques is, in some respects, is increasingly expected within certain demographics coming into the workplace. If you play games or and you have a lot of experience playing games, then you're quite well trained in the idea of levelling up and being able to repeat, learn through failure, try again, and have the opportunity to keep trying until you've demonstrated those skills. So that model of learning is quite increasingly prevalent, and yet there's quite a bit of a disconnect sometimes between what they then get as training. It's like, deliver it once, maybe engage with it a little bit, and then go away, and now we expect you to be able to do it perfectly. That's not how the world works, is it? But that's how a lot of our training is still designed. So we could learn a lot from this idea of being able to provide or leverage technology to give people the regular experience, the repeated experience to practice new skills, so they can genuinely accelerate the ability to perform when needed. And introducing more social interaction helps that, certainly in terms of building confidence and helping people work together on what are increasingly sort of complex and sophisticated challenges and tasks that we're asking them to do in the workplace. You can't just do it in isolation, you have to do it together. We can use technology to situate the learning, not just in front of a PC or a desk, but actually where you are and where you're working, wherever that is in the world. So being able to use tools such as wearable type technology is coming along. The fact that we wear a clunky smartphone is the beginning of something that's a fully trackable device that we can leverage. And we can also use back-end type technology, such as the Tin Can standards, which allows us to store more flexible records of what we're doing when we're learning and what we're doing in our job. So this is a new standard that more and more learning management environments are being able to support, which allows us to record the fact that you guys have attended this session, for example, or you have actively engaged with a bit of software that you've been trained on, or you have had the conversation with the manager that you've had, and of course completed the piece of e-learning that you were asked to do, which the previous SCORM standard allows you to do. All these things are more holistic and more broad in bringing together a much more effective solution. So we end up with a focus on performance. We can use the technology to help advise us and support us now. You know, we're nearly there. We're getting there in terms of the sort of applications of proactive support as opposed to reactive support from our devices. So having a device that actually prompts you to do something at the point and contextual time. For example, in this case, if you were a salesperson and you had just been on a negotiation skills course just recently, you're about to attend a client lunch, and you're given some top tips on negotiation just beforehand, just to remind you of what you've been through. So you actually have an opportunity to put it into practice in a real context. And that's powerful. That's when it starts to deliver real business benefits to the organisation and to the individual. So also about triggering action. So we've also got the opportunity to use technology to remind, to give us repeated access to the learning that we've had, to allow us to give us experience on that, but also to give us feedback, such as is increasingly happening with health bracelets, giving you data feedback on what you're doing. You'll see more of this sort of activity with jobs. In job roles, we'll get more real-time feedback on what we're doing. And even diagnostic tools such as this Skin Vision app, which if you use it on your skin, it actually will highlight potential melanoma issues. With self-diagnostic tools such as these will become more important. So just to wrap up then, the final slide here is a slightly complex one, but it's a little bit of a model again to help you think about thinking about performance, not just about learning. How do you drive that performance? Well, these are the key things I think that you should be thinking about. Be clear about the strategy that you're going to be taking. So my advice is think more holistically, think more in the more connected terms, more integrated terms. Is what you're doing supplementing existing things? How can you leverage that? Will you be able to embed new behaviours appropriately? Can you replace or partially replace existing technology? Important to reach out to stakeholders and be clear who your stakeholders really are. They're wider than you think, perhaps, to ensure that you get real success when you roll out your learning. Identify the right methods. We've seen there's a plethora of different channels and approaches, so it doesn't mean throw everything in the kitchen sink at the same time. You've got to be selective, and you've got to choose the things that are going to work for you in your organisation. And they can be decision aids, they can be specific portals that you might be providing. You might to embed your learning not on an abstract LMS where people go to learn abstractly, but perhaps in the tools that people use on an everyday basis. And think about mobile, which is again about putting the learning in people's pockets and being able to access it and refer to things when they need it. And validate your solution. Should you pilot these things? Yes, you should. You should try these things. These are new, this is perhaps new thinking. It's about being able to leverage new relationships that you've built in the organisation. You want to pilot that. So start small, but with a solution design that's broader than the sort of more simple things that we typically default to. And then engage your users. Use the clear model to think carefully about how your communication is structured, and don't think of it as an add-on. Think of it as integral to the learning experience that you're designing, and that will involve working with other people in the organisation, I think. So, those barriers I mentioned at the beginning, there are a variety of different types of solutions that you can provide to that. I won't go through this in too much extra depth, but you can see there are options available to tackling each of these things, which if they were available in your organisation, would give, I think, would catalyse the process of people acquiring new skills, new behaviours, and delivering the sort of faster rate of change in the organisation that you're looking to see. There's a couple of ones over there. So thank you very much. Happy to take any questions if you have any, either here or right now, or please do visit my colleagues over here just on the left. Thank you very much for your attention.